All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for today's Environmental Community of Practice. My name is Jen Wilson, and I'm the Director of Programming and Advocacy with New England Museum Association, and joined by my colleague at NEMA, Heather Riggs. Yay. And I'm going to hand it over to our co-facilitators, Matt Kirkman and Paul Fenton.
Good afternoon, everybody. If you're new to the group, it would be totally appropriate for you to introduce yourself in the chat chat string. We don't usually do a round robin introduction because it eats up too much of the agenda. But please take an opportunity to let us know who you are, who you're with, where you're from, something like that. This is our monthly gathering. Here in May. Happy May. Paul's going to command most of the agenda today. He's both a co-chair, but also he's our guest speaker for this month. And we will be talking about youth programming specifically with Paul. Paul, did you want me to go ahead and do the blurb for next month? Okay, he says yes. So we are convening again next month on June 6th. And I will be facilitating a conversation with some special guests from NAAE, which is the North American Association for Environmental Education. And we're going to be talking about both local and national initiatives for environmental literacy specifically. So if you are a museum educator or an exhibition person, somebody who has content, a museum content generation as part of your role, you might be interested in some of the standards and initiatives put forth by both the New England the New England Environmental Education Organization and the National Environmental Organization, NAAE. So we will have Judy Bross, who's the executive director of the North American Association for Environmental Ed, and Boris Simmons, who's the director of the National Project for Excellence in Environmental Ed. So we have two guest speakers next month. That's June 6th at 3 o'clock Eastern, as is usual. So, Paul, any other housekeeping ideas? Heather and Jen, any other housekeeping things before we?
Nope, you're all set.
Okay.
Also, publication awards are tomorrow. If you are submitting something, and also the salary and benefit survey, if your institution has not submitted that, I've extended the deadline until May 24th. Make sure the higher ups know about it because we need all the info as possible. Those are my NEMA comments.
Great.
The only other environmental community of practice housekeeping note is if you are new or have not yet joined the group in the NEMA portal, please try to do that. My email address is on the first slide of my deck here, so you can feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure the NEMA folks, I'm gonna volunteer them to help you as well. Happy to help that out. You will see the reminders for these meetings in the general NEMA emails, but if you'd like to get an additional email from me, you can join the group in the NEMA portal. So feel free to do that. I will also share a very short survey at the end of the meeting today. Just trying to start collecting folks' feedback on how they're finding these meetings, sessions, things. Great. Excellent. So yes, let me share my screen. And the last time I tried to do this, I made a big fool of myself for being like, everyone should be able to share their screen. It's 2024.
We had an earlier conversation where the guy's like, this is my first time on Zoom.
Wow.
It was not, but it was just funny to say that because I mean we've been on Zoom now for multiple years. But
all right. How does that look?
Looks great.
Fantastic. All righty. So hi, everyone. I'm Paul. I am the Director of Environmental and Outdoor Education at Discovery Museum in Acton, in addition to being one of the co-facilitators or co-chairs of the Environmental community of practice through NEMA. Discovery Museum is a, depending on who you ask, small to medium-sized children's museum. We sort of think of ourselves also as a children's museum that specializes in science and nature. Our tagline is science, nature, play. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of who we are. So today, and I know we've been thanked already, but I'll thank you all again for joining. I appreciate folks coming out to hear a little bit about my work. So what we're going to talk about today is how I think about through the research on climate and environmental literacy, sort of is how I think about it with very young learners. And that's really 0 to 8, but maybe even more specifically 0 to 4, depending on certain contexts. Those are the folks who make up the bulk of my audience at Discovery Museum, that 0 to 4, maybe 5 crowd. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the examples of programs that I have developed and facilitate at the museum. If there are questions, I'm not sure how good I'm going to be at monitoring the chat, but you can throw them in the chat and hopefully my friends and colleagues will help me out. Feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, yell at me, whatever is the best way to get my attention. And I can try to answer if there are, clarifying questions throughout. I assume that I will not talk for a full 50 minutes. So there should be some time at the end. But like I said, if there's you want to stop me and ask a clarifying question or something like that, please feel free to do so. So without further ado, here we go. So my sort of understanding, my journey of understanding kind of in where I'm at with this really starts with David Sobel's work. And folks that are environmental educators probably know David Sobel, although I've encountered folks that don't know his work. And he wrote a book in 1996 called Beyond Ecophobia. And this phrase, this term ecophobia, he really helped to coin and to sort of help the community think about what does this mean. So the story is that one of Sobel's graduate students was studying this sort of cohort of 4th grade classrooms. And they were, I forget exactly, they were looking at student work, and I forget exactly what the work was, what the different projects that they were really looking at were. But what they found, and so they were kind of built out into 2 sets of 2, right? And what they found is that in 2 of the classrooms, the children, they were getting this really strong signal that the children had this fear whenever they were asked about the environment or the earth or anything like that, that they were getting this real strong fear association. And then in the other 2, they were not. They were getting outdoors is wonderful, it's playful, I explore, I love it, it's beautiful, just very strong positive emotions associated. So they were like, what's going on here? So the first thing they did was they talked to the teachers. Hey, what do you what might be going on here? And what they found was that the 2 classrooms with the fear association had just done a fairly robust Earth Week curriculum, and that the 2 with the joyful associations had not done an Earth Week curriculum. And that's, first, that's pretty interesting, I think. And the reasoning that they eventually get to, and again, I'll share some of the research that's taken place since this book came out. But essentially what was going on with those 2 classrooms that were experiencing this fear association was that they were starting to feel that the entire weight of the Earth's problems was on their shoulders, not just the classroom, but the individual children were starting to take this burden of all of the Earth's environmental challenges on themselves. So that is in a nutshell what ecophobia is, that if we begin to talk to young people about things like climate change, pollution, even these sort of global or national or state, local, even local environmental challenges at too young an age before they are developmentally ready to think about it, and some might argue that even grown-ups are not developmentally ready to think about climate change, that this is what's going to happen, that they're going to develop a fear, they're going to develop anxiety around these issues. So if we can't do that, what can we do? Well, fortunately, again, the research kind of helps us think about what are some of the right ways to create environmental programming for younger students. And one of the things that comes up in Sobel's work and in other work is this concept of wild play. And wild play is not like out of control play. It's simply play in wild spaces. So opportunities for young people to be in the woods, to be in ecosystems, playing in ecosystems, engaging in nature play, or play with natural objects in natural spaces. So going back just a few years before Beyond Ecophobia was published, Matthias Finger publishes an article. He publishes some research. What he finds is that that basically, similar to Sobel's sort of analysis of those fourth grade classrooms, that that information, as you can read, knowledge, awareness, predicts very little of the variability when it comes to environmental behaviors, both in childhood and then again later in life. But that one of, if not the strongest factor for seeing pro-environmental behaviors later is experiences in and with the environment. And you also often see, maybe not in this piece of research, but you often see formative outdoor experiences with a trusted adult. That trusted adult can be super important for young people to develop a positive association with the natural world and to form this relationship with the natural world. Think about, going on hikes, going camping, that kind of stuff. Here you can see kiddos playing in our outdoor play space at the museum, Discovery Woods, which is, maybe not quite wild play, but hopefully we hope that it's close. So let's move on to the next piece of research. So in a little bit more on wild play, in 2007, Luis Chawla publishes this piece of research where Chawla actually she analyzes the life experiences of environmentalists. So this is, people like Rachel Carson, people like David Attenborough, people who are and others who are not as famous, right? But the sort of like not just environmental educators, but people who are sort of committed to in some ways committed their professional lives to caring for the environment in one way or another. And again, what she finds is that there is this association with positive experiences of nature in childhood. And again, you can see here with role models who gave the natural world appreciative attention. So there's that sort of trusted adult showing up in Chawla's research, that for what she was seeing in the data sets were the thing, again, being most important is just being outside, being out in nature, and forming that positive relationship with the natural world. this is maybe my favorite piece of research. So I put these out of chronological order. I didn't mean to do that. In 2006, Wells and Leckies publish research, and they find 2,000 adults aged 18 to 90, and they put them into these 3 categories. So they're not assigning them these categories, they're just interviewing them and asking, when you were a child, what kinds of outdoor experiences, what kind of experience with the natural world did you have? And so they found that there were sort of 3 main types of experiences that these folks had. They had the wild play group, which is, again, people who were spending a lot of their childhood out in the woods, out in natural spaces, just roaming around, probably, with their friends in packs, as you do, and just, out there having fun in nature. Second category was what they call domesticated nature play. So that's your a petting zoo, a 4-H camp. You might consider our exhibit, I don't know. I think we could get into a conversation about whether, a place like a botanical garden or our exhibit at Discovery Museum is truly wild play, or if it's domesticated nature play, stuff like that, where it's like, it's not quite wild, it's a little bit more controlled, but you're still getting a positive experience of the natural world. And then number 3, traditional environmental education, which is sort of the like when I was a kid, it was like save the rainforest, don't waste water, that type of stuff. And that's that sort of like didactic, information-based, like if we just tell the kids that when they leave the lights on, they're wrecking the planet, they'll learn, they'll understand. But it turns out they don't. What they found, perhaps unsurprisingly at this point, is that the folks who had the strongest, so folks in the wild play group had both very strong environmental values, but also very strong environmental behaviors. So they had the values, and then their behaviors were matching their values. Group number 2, very strong environmental values, weaker with the behavior. So had the values, they weren't always following through with their behaviors. Number 3, didn't have strong environmental values and didn't have strong environmental behaviors. So this, again, in 2006, people are really like, oh, shoot, maybe all that stuff we were doing in the 70s and 80s was not working the way we thought it was going to work. And that's when I think really, again, the tide really started to turn in environmental education for this young audience. I also want to talk a little bit about how there's a couple of like sort of tangentially related things associated with play and with being outdoors that are not maybe directly environmental, but I think I'll make the case. I think you'll follow me. So in my work, one of the things that I focus on is civic skills and building civic skills even in our very youngest audiences. I can talk a little bit more about it, but like, for example, I had again, our like 2 to 5-year-olds sending messages to their elected officials during a program, for example. You can start to build these skills very, very early. And so Stephen Horowitz in 2015 publishes a piece of writing research. His paper is a little bit more like looking at other research and like positing his belief that unstructured play supports the foundational skills that we need for a healthy democracy, basically. So unstructured play, a little bit different from from wild play in that you can have unstructured play opportunities indoors, outdoors, anywhere, right? But the idea of child-led play experiences, and this is really like I don't know if folks are familiar with, what do they call them? The adventure playgrounds. They're pretty popular in Europe, where basically like there are some where like the grown-ups aren't even allowed into these spaces. And they have adult facilitators that make the experience safe, but like kids are like hammering nails and setting fires and like just like doing whatever they want. Because kids are so curious about the world. And like, I know I set some fires when I was a kid, and it was probably pretty dangerous. And it would have been really cool to have a space like that to go and be safe. But again, that this idea of having young people experience play that is almost purely directed by the children and by groups of children. It allows them to deal with conflict resolution and negotiation and other skills that are important for a healthy democracy. So that I would also argue that that having a healthy democracy, having civic skills like these is important for environmentally literate young people. And I think a lot of us probably know there's a number of health benefits just for being outside. One of my favorite facts is that when you put your hands in dirt, you get all these like great neurotransmitters and hormones suddenly released into your brain. You should try it out. I do it all the time. And like, so, right. And so like being a healthy individual, like, so this is kind of like a Maslow's hierarchy argument that like you can't be a informed, active participant and be a steward of the planet if your health isn't great. Like you're gonna have to focus on your health, right? So spending more time outside is a great way to get a health boost. Also, climate anxiety is a thing, and so just being in green spaces can help that, right? So I know, and folks that participate that really are, if I assume there's some folks in the Zoom space today that sort of self-identify as environmental educators or climate educators or some subset of that. And it can be very taxing. I know from my personal experience, I've had moments of it being incredibly psychologically demanding. And so just allowing to, getting yourself outside helps with that, and it helps the young people that we work with. So another great benefit. So this one I will go through. I'll try to go through fairly quickly because these are things that are mostly from the world of communicating about climate change with grown-ups. But I do think that there is some relation to how we think about creating programming for young people as well. So folks that are not familiar, the sort of three organizations at the top, Frameworks, the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation, and Yale Climate Connections have done a lot of very excellent evidence-based work on how to talk to the public about climate change in a way that is hopeful and productive and doesn't trigger those fear, anxiety, overwhelmed responses. And so in short, you use the three sort of tools here, values. So again, like a lot of people are sometimes tempted to get into, to try to like show people the data and hope that the data will convince them that climate change is a problem and that we should do something about it. And it turns out that doesn't actually work very well when you do it in real life. But what does work is using shared values. I'll just leave it at that for now. If you want to talk more about it during question and answer, I can. The second thing you want to do is use metaphors. The one that I have here is the heat trapping blanket. So that's a metaphor for how mostly carbon dioxide, but other heat trapping gases trap heat on Earth. We try not to use, I try not to use the term greenhouse gases anymore because people don't actually understand how a greenhouse works. They may have an experience of being in a greenhouse, but a lot of people haven't. Most people, especially here in New England, have used a blanket and understand like the basics of like you put a blanket on, it makes you warmer. And then solutions. You really want to lead with solutions. We want to make sure that solutions are being highlighted and that people understand that a lot of smart people are working on solutions to the various environmental challenges that we face, and we can invite our participants and our audiences along to join up with those solutions in a variety of ways. So again, this is really from maybe more from the world of communicating with teenagers and grown-ups. But as I get into some of the specific programming elements, I think we'll see that they're relevant to that work as well. So, speaking of that, I'm just going to take a drink of water. Excuse me. What we do here at Discovery Museum. So again, I'm going to kind of move into my work here. I've been director of environmental and outdoor education at the museum for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in a couple of weeks. And before that, I worked for 10 years at New England Aquarium, where I did a lot of different things and worked with a lot of different audiences, adults, teenagers, but also school-age children, and got to take a lot of folks outdoors all the time. So here at Discovery, we call our environmental educational philosophy in with 4. Now let's see, do I have another slide that explains? Nope. All right. So in with 4, I'll explain it here. So we create experiences for our audiences to be in nature. That's the in. We create experiences for our audiences to learn with nature. And those are sort of like I'm like, those are the classical environmental education. And then I remember like, no, not the light bulb thing. It's sort of like doing leaf rubbings, right? Or I do one that I call bug hunt, where we're just looking for bugs. It's sort of like focusing on maybe like one-ish part of the natural world and trying to work with the young people to dive a little bit deeper, notice a little bit more on that sort of like one aspect. And then we create experiences for our audiences to take action for nature. And I'll get into, there's a couple of different ways that we do that, and I'll get into that as we go. I'm going to talk a bit about each of these 3 categories. So we create experiences for our audiences to be in nature. 3 examples. My favorite example is outdoor yoga, because one of the ways that I like to think about this is that we can take things that could take place inside and just move them outside. And suddenly we have a program that's in nature. And there are a couple of goals. It's like all of the goals, right, of like what we know about people being in nature, right? We know that we're activating a lot of stuff just by taking people outside, right? Kind of what we were talking about with the research. We also know that some folks are not as comfortable being outside. We know that some caregivers are not as comfortable taking their kids outside, especially in my experience. very, very youngest, the 0 to 18-month folks, I find that caregivers are often, what if they start shoveling dirt into their mouth? What if XYZ, what if there's a bee? And so these programs are really meant to help the kids, but also the caregivers get more comfortable in maybe a slightly more controlled setting here at the museum. Our visitor, like all museums, we are trusted. And so we use that trust to help our visitors get a little bit more comfortable outside. So yeah, that's the goal. And that's what I was going to say is that with a lot of these, Mud Kitchen is the one that I think I hear this the most. Oh, we could do this at home. One of our other main ethoses here at Discovery Museum is that we use everyday materials. We try not to, I mean, you hear what I'm saying. We try to use things that are at hand, easy to access, easy to acquire. And so like our Mud Kitchen setup is like bowls and pots and pans and buckets and just stuff that you might have lying around. And again, we we want our audience to say, oh, we could just do this at home. Not that we don't want them to come to the museum. We do want them to come back. But we also want them to do it again, right? So we want them to have this in nature experience here and then try it out again later at home. So a couple of examples of our with nature experiences. Nature take-aparts, we have done for many, many years a program called Take-aparts Without the Nature, which is electronic. So kids get to use real tools and take apart old stereos and whatever we get donated. So this was a little bit of a spin on that. So we collect natural objects, flowers, pine cones, etc. And we just take it apart. We use tweezers and simple tool. Again, try to have stuff that you just have on hand at home and take them apart to investigate what they look like on the inside, or what happens when I, keep just peeling the petals off of the flower. What happens when I keep peeling the scales off of the pine cone, etc. Winter Tree Buds is a program that I do, obviously in the winter. Again, trying to have young people and families look a little bit closer at buds and how different plants they can look really, really different. And with a lot of these with that kind of program, whenever I'm like working on identification with young people or grown-ups, I really think about not sending them out into the world being able to identify different species, but that is a possibility for them if it's something that they're interested in later, that they can learn to identify the difference between a red maple and a sugar maple if they want to. And then I mentioned before, but bug hunt, it's just like it sounds. We get out some magnifiers, we get out some soil sifters, we get out some trowels, whatever we have, and we try to look for bugs. So fun. So my like tagline in life is like in not just for like my job, but in life is I take you outside and hopefully you touch a slug. And that's my favorite thing when you hear a chorus of young people, we found a slug. Like it's just, I just love it. I can't get enough of it. So yeah, that's bug hunt. Right. So our 4 nature experiences, and right there, I'll get it. Sorry, I'm outthinking myself here. So I'll get into the programmatic, and then I'll say a little bit more about how we think about for nature, sort of on a institutional level. So one style of taking action for nature that we facilitate at the museum is directly facilitating an action, doing a good thing for the ecosystem with young people and their caregivers. So 2 examples, planting wildflowers. So we do that in our Discovery Woods. supports pollinators, so good thing to do. And then we call it invasive species scavenger hunt. It's removing invasive plants. Like it's less a scavenger hunt and more tool safety. Like I like hand 4-year-olds a pair of loppers, and I'm like, okay, have fun. With their caregivers are there. But we like check out the plants, and then we use tools to remove them. So again, it's for the way that I think about that program is like the experience for the child is really, again, it's more about tool safety. It's more about getting to do something that's like maybe a little bit dangerous that like maybe you wouldn't be able to do at home. Empowering them, showing them that you trust the children. And the benefit though is that we've removed some invasive plants from our campus. So I mentioned this when we were talking about the article on unstructured play a little bit, but one of the other sort of main ways that I think about for nature programming is by developing civic skills. So our 2 examples here. Wildlife poster making is where I set out a bunch of books about wildlife. I like to have those like big, colorful coffee table books. They're usually like 1-word titles: bird, ocean, that kind of stuff. And the prompt is basically choose a living thing that you think is cool and make a poster about it, and tell people why is it cool. And so this is an attempt to activate. One of the things that I think about is understanding what you value, right? Like you're like, oh, I like, especially for young people, like I realize that I value the swallow-tailed kite, or I will get into it in just a second, but like I value the pond near my house. Like what is it in the world that you value? Just like understanding that as a young person, I think is a really helpful step towards then communicating those values and ultimately advocating for those things that you value. So like we asked them to make this poster, and then who knows, right? It's impossible to know, but I encourage them to go and see if they could hang it up in their classroom or even at home. Put it up in the hallway, and dad will see it, and mom and dad or auntie or their grandma or whoever will see it. And that's advocacy at an age appropriate level, right? So that's the attempt there. Dream City is one of my favorite programs. I've been working on this program for a long time. It came with me from New England Aquarium to Discovery Museum, and this iteration of it, I like to do it these days just on butcher paper with colored pencils, and that's it. And the prompt here is we're illustrating our dream city. What are things that you value in your neighborhood? Or what are things that you would like to see in your city of the future? Like what's something that you, and it scales well, because, even for, the zeros can just scribble and that's fine. Once you're 2.5, 3, you can start to like, you'll make a squiggle that looks a little bit more like a pond or a tree or something. Once they're 5, then they can really start to like be like, oh yeah, like I value, again, like the pond near my house. That's something that I want to see in my dream city is a pond. I always have really good conversations with the caregivers as we're drawing. I always participate. Like I always am adding to. I always start it with a salt marsh because I love salt marshes. And that's it. So a couple of one addition that we have is that we have cards that say, in my city I want ... And so folks can like add to the dream city and then fill one of those out if they want, but they can also look back at what other people have said that they want. And I think that what I try to do is then, right, like we're thinking about community, right? We're thinking about what we value collectively, and trying to activate that shared value. And what's really cool is that basically every single time I have facilitated this program, I see the same 4 things: green space, blue space, water, school, library. Pretty much every single time you get those 4 things. So that says to me that those are things that young people value, and like I can help them think about. One of the things I'm trying to do with this program now is in my facilitation start to help young people think about, like, well, what are the things that we need to have those things? Like what do you need to have a park, right? Like you need people who are going to manage the park and maintain the park and steward the park, right? So very kind of early on in my experimenting with that, but that's sort of what I'm trying to do with this program these days. And then our final, well, not quite, some secret for nature categories coming up, but sort of the final main category is maybe focusing a little bit on environmental literacy. And what I mean by that in this context is we're learning about something that will eventually, hopefully it will eventually help these young people have hooks to hang things on when they're starting to learn more. So let me explain. Maybe that made sense, maybe it didn't, but let me explain. With the example of modeling molecules, I'm not going to teach kids about climate change, right? We know that's not the right way to go. You can have and to be, I will say, like, you can, and I have had conversations with young people about climate change. It's not impossible, but for there to be a museum program about climate change for children is, for our age range, is probably developmentally inappropriate. So, but you can teach them about molecules. So we have a variety of building toys. We put them together. We encourage young people who are, once they're 5, 6, you can start to put together your oxygen and your water and your carbon dioxide. And so again, I'm not then making the jump from, oh, carbon dioxide is the main molecule that causes global warming and climate change. I'm just building the groundwork, right, for them to then go out into the world and be like, oh, carbon dioxide, I've heard of that. I know what that looks like. I built the molecule at the museum. Obviously, they may not be thinking those exact thoughts, but I think you follow. Our other example here is soil science, where again, like, soil is a deeply important and complex part of a healthy ecosystem. I am not explaining how that works to our young visitors. I am just out there with a soil core, with a sifter, with some shovels and trowels. We're just playing and getting our hands dirty and having fun. But again, the idea is that they're being exposed to real science tools. They're looking at soil in a way that maybe they never have before, and it's trying to build that groundwork for what comes later in their life. So I will say that we also think about, and this is like maybe outside the sort of for young children part of today's presentation, but we also think about for experiences on an institutional level. So for example, we provide compost containers for our visitors. So when they're eating at the museum, if they have food scraps left over, they can put them in a compost container instead of in the trash. And we were like, wouldn't it be cool if like caregivers start to have these conversations about like, well, what is compost and why do we do it? And like, of course, that has naturally happened. Without even trying, I overhear caregivers having those types of conversations with their kiddos. So we think of that as a for nature experience. We're helping the caregivers and the children do a positive thing for the environment, and then hopefully they're kind of carrying that forward with them. And then the other secret for nature is in nature, because as we learned, the biggest predictor for environmental attitudes and behaviors later in life is spending time outside with a trusted adult. So when children come to the museum to play, and they, you know, most of the more warm weather season at least, they I would say a good chunk of them do spend some time playing outside in Discovery Woods. I think of that as a for nature experience, that we are facilitating those young people being on the path to future environmental stewardship. So sort of an Ouroboros of nature education here. So I'm going to very quickly talk through some of our partnership stuff, because I want to leave time for questions. I forgot I had these slides. So we do a program we call Nature Connections, where basically the idea is to invite folks, especially folks who might not get to spend time in nature a lot. This is a group from Boston. We try to invite a variety of folks from various marginalized communities to come spend time in nature. And we often provide things like nature journals or backpacks or magnifiers, so that they can, you know, and what's really cool is that these young people, this was completely unprompted. Like, they just got these resources and they just like sat down and started journaling. Like, they didn't have, there's all this stuff to play with. They didn't have to do that. It's so cool. We also have created these resources to help caregivers understand the connection between nature and health. So that is like a little bit more geared towards the caregivers, and these what we call nature passports. So different activities, simple activities that families can do together outside. We're also part of a collaborative called Learning Ecosystems Northeast, which the idea is to get other organizations doing similar educational experiences. And our focus is really playing outside and using real science tools. So we use microscopes. Well, you can see them, all these different real science tools. Again, one of my favorite things is just like handing real stuff to kids and letting that, and like, again, like just being like, oh yeah, no, you can use it. I trust you. It's cool. Like, have fun. Love it. This project has a data literacy component. So here's an example of what we call data self-portrait. So we had young people create these sort of self-portraits through symbols. And then their peers had to analyze the self-portraits and extract information out of them. So again, it's been a fun challenge to think about, like, how do I work on data literacy with 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds? And that's all. I did it. I didn't talk for 50 minutes. So great. So so we got about 10 minutes left in our time together today. I would be happy to answer any questions if I can. Feel free to come off mute, raise your hand.
Paul, I don't have a specific question, but I was so intrigued by this. First of all, thank you for your presentation. And can I come and play in the dirt, and will you show me some things? Because like, as adults, we also want to remember why we love nature so much. I think you should do an adult one just for us. just throwing it out there.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it's so we have all these quotes about play at the museum, and one of them, I was just reading it this morning, that says, we don't stop playing when we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. And that really resonates with me. Because I mean, that's part of why I'm a children's museum professional, that I just like never stopped playing. But yeah, I agree. It's interesting, and we have definitely thought about, for our Nature Connections work, reaching out to the caregivers of adults with disabilities, for example, and the adults with disabilities themselves, because we know that folks that that experience high stress on a day-to-day basis could definitely benefit from something like that. But you're right that all of us can. So yeah, something to think about. Definitely could be a environmental community practice field trip, maybe. Do some digging in the dirt. Yeah, Rachel. Hi.
Hi. So at what point might you start actually talking about things that could be scary, like
Yeah,
the effects of climate change?
for sure. Yeah, the sort of like collective wisdom is about fourth grade, which I know kind of goes counter to the whole beginning part of the story with David Sobel. But that's again, that's the very start. And again, we could probably have a whole conversation about like how to have a conversation with somebody who's younger than fourth grade in a way that is productive and positive and hopeful. I don't think I have time to really answer that question. But again, it's about fourth grade, where you can start and at fourth grade, you know, one of the things you want to try to do with young people is still kind of frame these things as a local and at a personal matter. And what I mean by that is like, you know, when I learned about saving the rainforest when I was in, you know, third or fourth grade, like it was very abstract for me. I didn't know really what the rainforest was or where it was. I didn't really understand what that meant. But if you can get young people to engage in a beach cleanup, or I'm helping to organize here in Acton an invasive species removal with some third graders, right? They've been working on thinking about endangered species, so they have this understanding of what that means, all local to Massachusetts, and so then we're going to go out and remove some invasive species. So if you can make those environmental challenges relevant to their day-to-day lives, I think that's definitely the most effective. And then I would say, you know, right, once you get to middle school, you know, then I think it's totally age appropriate and developmentally appropriate to start talking about mechanisms, right? And like what is climate change, and I think then my philosophy tends to be like there are people working. It's like I think that and that's true for younger as well. That like for young people, we want to not scare them, and we want to give them hope, and we want to make them feel safe, that like people are thinking about this and they're working on that. Once we get into the teenage years, then as I think a lot of people know, like teenagers are the fiercest of all of us. Like they care. I got to work with some very awesome teenagers when I was at the aquarium, and I think once you're into the teenage years, then like you can really do some very meaty environmental advocacy work.
So something as simple as saying single-use plastics, like avoid single-use plastics because we don't want trash. I mean, would you say
yeah,
later?
you could
Not,
sorry, finish your question.
well, would you wait until they were in middle school to go into what happens with plastic, or will you just say, you know, look at all, what if you saw this lying under a tree? Isn't that messy? Shouldn't we? Or
so here's the thing is I don't lie to children, right? So like if a kid asks me why, I'm going to try to have that conversation with them, you know, like, so, and I think, you know, so what I mean by that is like, if I'm like, oh, we should clean up all this plastic, and they're like, well, why? I'm like, well, plastic lasts a really long time, and if we don't clean it up, like, it's just you know, why don't it's gonna stay here, and we should clean it up. You know, again, it's a difficult question to ask because it's so context dependent. It's dependent. Like I approach this as a dad very differently than I approach it as a museum educator. But yeah, I think that I know it's complicated. I'm not really giving you an answer, but I again, like my sort of my sort of gut is like, you don't need to avoid the conversations with folks who are younger than fourth grade, but you might want a more nuanced understanding of who they are and where they're at and what the problem is. But yeah, once you're into 5th, 6th grade, absolutely, I think you can have those types of conversations with young people.
You brought up one other thing. I'm asking too many questions, but I heard about programs that were geared for parents to be able to talk to their children. So not for children, but for parents.
Yep.
Do you do any?
Yeah, I do not. I have not facilitated anything like that myself. But I think that's similar in some ways to what the work of the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation, in that they're more focused on educators, but their whole way of being is helping people understand, how do I have a conversation about climate change? Because again, even for grown-ups, like, climate change is a hyper object, which, like, it's this thing outside of space and time, and like we can't really as grown-ups get our heads around it. So anyway, I think yes, that exists. I have not ever facilitated one, but I think that's really cool work.
Paul, can you say something about what would you do if your site wasn't so blessed with such beautiful outdoor space? What about those museums that don't have, they're not adjacent to a park, or they don't have, they literally don't have a front yard even? What would you do if that was your situation?
For sure. I have done this because one of my first experiences as a environmental educator was going to community centers in Providence, Rhode Island, and there's a lot of concrete. And I wanted to do it. I was like, let's take the kids outside, and what did we do? We looked at ants, we looked at birds flying by, we looked at shrubs, we found clouds, we found ladybug larvae. Like there's a world of I've done it in Waltham, Massachusetts, was maybe even more concrete than Providence, and this was really cool that people ask me this question a lot, and I was like, and even like, I think that construction vehicles are like the charismatic megafauna of North America, because we don't have them anymore. And I've heard that David Sobel is actually thinking about changing his nature to outdoors. And I think that, and the last time I was talking to some folks about this, they were like, it's because it's actually just being outside and having this rich sensory world. So I would do that. Yeah. I would just go outside, whatever space you can. You can also bring nature inside. We do that a little bit less, but I know some of my colleagues at other museums that don't have outdoor space, bring the dirt inside, bring the sticks inside, bring animals inside. So we are at 4 o'clock. I want to be mindful of folks' time. Thank you again for joining us. I'm going to put a link to a very short survey. I promise it's very short. I'm very good at making short surveys. In the chat, please fill it out, because I'd love to get folks' feedback on how they think about these things. So thanks so much for coming. I hope this was useful. Have a lovely afternoon.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks so much, everybody.